All right, good morning. We went old school on you on that one. The only thing that we didn't show was the reality of fathers, right? Is when you were yelling at your kids to get out of their bathroom today and to get in the car, or we're going to be late to church, right? So we put on. Next time we'll put more of the reality in there. Welcome to Clayton Crossings. I'm so glad you've chosen to be here on Father's Day. And if you're visiting with us, we want to especially welcome you. If you're watching us online, we're so thankful that you tuned in, whether it's during vacation or whatever it is that you're doing that couldn't be here live. I'm so thankful. I really am. And today is going to be a little bit different. One of our elders, Wayne Wallace, is going to be bringing the message. This is his third year in a row. And he says he's running out of Father's Day material. So sorry, Wayne. This is a trifecta for you. But Wayne is one of our elders. When I moved here in 2019, I lived with Wayne for a few weeks. And he's thinking it was a lot longer than that. But lived with him for a few weeks, and we really got to know each other, watching a lot of NBA games late at night. And one of the things that he tried to do was kill me with them Jamaican spices. I don't know what was in that, Wayne, but you tried to kill me with those ribs that day. It was really spicy. But I'm so grateful to have gotten to know Wayne. And Wayne is more than just a brother. He's one of our elders. And we have several elders that oversee and shepherd in our church. And I just want you guys to know kind of the structure of our church. We're a plurality of elders, and I'm just one of several elders that we have in this church. So we're all responsible for the shepherding and the oversight of the church. And so Wayne helps care for your souls. It's not just Andre that you see up here using his gifts every week. We have very gifted people that come up here and can help shoulder the load of the things that are happening in this church. And so I'm going to introduce Wayne. Wayne's going to come up. Wayne's affectionately, we call him the mayor. Most of you know him. Let's give him a warm Clayton Crossings welcome. I love you, Wayne, and I'm so excited for you to bring God's word here today. All right, let me pray over you. Father, thank you for your word. Thank you, God, for Father's Day. We need fathers. God, we need them to be responsible. God, we need them to lead well in their homes. Thank you for Wayne and, God, his example in leadership. And him, God, aside from running a business and eldering in this church, God, and all the time and energy that it takes, God, I'm so grateful for the sacrifices that he personally makes for our church. And so, God, I pray you'd bless him. Use him here this morning to speak to us. And God, would your spirit do what we can't do and use him in a way that, God, that shows, God, your glory and your power. And thankful for him. Use him here as he comes. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Okay. A couple of things. I'll start off with this. Andre said he was in my house for 2 weeks. It may have felt like 2 weeks to him because we treated him so well, okay? I'm here to tell you, he was in our house for 2 months and it felt like 2 years, okay? I told his wife, Charlotte, I says, I pray for you more than ever after having Andre live in my house because he takes a lot of catering too. I love you, Dre. Happy Father's Day, everyone. For all the men here this morning, it's the day we get to celebrate us as dads, right? And I know in a group of people this large, we've got folks all over the different spectrum in terms of memories and thoughts of Father's Day. If you're like me, I was fortunate. My dad was I would call him a Hall of Fame dad, right? My dad did a lot of things right, very few things wrong, but he wasn't perfect. And I'm sure a lot of you guys are like that, where you're doing a lot of things right, but you're not perfect. And then for some of you, today is a day where you're going, man, I grew up in a home that had a lot of dysfunction. My thoughts, my dad aren't the best. Or you might say, hey, my dad isn't around anymore. My dad for me personally, my dad passed away 8 years ago, last month. And every Father's Day, I get a little bit emotional because I miss my dad. And I'm honored today to share with my faith family just some things the Lord's been laying on my heart. And as Andre mentioned, this is my third year in a row. And I go, dude, once again, I'm out of material. Give me another Sunday to preach. All right, I'm out of material for Father's Day. But no, I trust that as I share this morning, that the Lord would encourage your heart, first of all. And if there's some areas that you need to shore up, that He'd convict you of that. I said I was out of material, but then the production team gave me grief because I think I went 15, 20 minutes over this morning. So obviously, I am not as out of material as I think. We're going to be looking today from Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4. It says, "Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger by the way you treat them, but rather bring them up with the discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord." And so I grew up old school. When I grew up in my formative years, 50 years plus ago, I learned everything from the King James Version, right? So the King James Version is still the version I hear in my head when I read Scripture. And it says, "Fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but raise them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord." But I like how the NLT puts it. "But bring them up with the discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord." Let's pray. Father, I just want to thank you so much for this morning. Thank you for a day to recognize dads. Father, thank you for being the ultimate representation of fatherhood, a father who loves us, who pursues us, a father who corrects us and instructs us. Dear Lord, Father, I just pray that this morning that folks here in the auditorium will hear from you and not from me, and that you would give us a new and fresh way of looking at what it means to be a dad and encouraging us in the meantime. In your name we pray. Amen. December 2006, our first child was going to community college. And I remember saying to him, "Bradley, grades out yet?" And he goes, "No, Dad." And I go, "Okay, I went to college too, So I'm thinking, grades should be out by now, but maybe they're running late. We were getting ready to head down to Florida for annual Christmas vacation. This is like December 21st. And I said, "Bradley, grades out yet, son?" He goes, "No, Dad." No, I may have been born at night, but it wasn't last night, right? I knew grades were out. So I said, "Tell you what, son, maybe the grades came out since the last time you looked at your laptop. So let's pull it up together." So as I sat on his bed next to him and he started pulling it up, and I saw just a little nervousness in his hands, he then knew that I was getting ready to know what he already knew, right? Grades had come out, and I think the grades went something like this. He had 5 classes taken in community college. He had a B, a C, 2 D's, and an F. And I remember being so upset, so livid, that I literally draped him up. It's a word we use in Jamaica, drape up. But I remember lifting him up by his shirt and put him up against the wall. And it was not one of my best Christian modeling moments at all. I was upset, I was angry. But I wasn't angry because of his grades, because there were times in college I didn't have the best grades either. But I was angry and upset because he lied to me. I had to go back a few days later and apologize to him for my outburst. And one of the things we're going to be talking about today is modeling Christ in front of our children. So in looking at this passage, it says, the word fathers, right? That's where it starts. Fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, or fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, could well be translated parents, because it's an admonishment and instruction to both the father and the mother. But the emphasis is largely placed on the dads, for it's the dad's responsibility to kind of steer and to shepherd, it's a word Andre uses, steer and shepherd what children are to become. For me as a dad, that's sobering, that Paul's calling out dads in particular, right? Mothers may enforce policy, but it's dad's task to set it and to see that his kids are raised properly. This just requires spiritual discipline on the part of parents, but particularly on dads. And as I had a conversation with one of my good friends after church this morning, and I'll just interject something here. When I'm saying parents, or when I'm saying dads, or when I'm saying moms, I also want to interject that I'm talking to stepdads and stepmoms, right? So a lot of times when you find yourself in that place of step, it's a little confusing, right? What do I speak into and what do I not speak into? Well, this passage from Ephesians 6 is for you as well, stepdads and stepmoms. Based on your position that God has placed you in that home, you have a place of authority, okay? So speak out because you've been given a place of authority. I know for me, becoming a parent was an adjustment of my lifestyle. When I got married, I was pretty Wayne-focused, right? If you ask my wife, she may still tell you today that I'm still quite Wayne-focused. When I got married, I was Wayne-focused, but then I had a bride, so I had to be some Nalda-focused as well. Well, everything changed once we started having kids, right? When I go to bed, I like to sleep. And I remember bringing our kids home from the hospital, and guess what? My sleep life was ruined, shattered immediately, right? My life was now focused on how do I get this child to be quiet just so Poppy can get some rest, right? But becoming a parent takes an adjustment of our lifestyle. So one of my questions is, are you being conscious? Are you being deliberate? Are you being intentional about the time you're spending with your kids? You see, both parents should be united in raising children, disciplining them, teaching them. We should work towards having consistent messages. Dad can't be saying one thing and mom's doing another, or vice versa, right? Because guess what? Our kids snuff that out pretty quickly. In the Bible, the ultimate responsibility for what a home becomes is dad's. So this word is addressed to fathers. However, if you're a single mom here this morning, as I said before with stepdads and stepmoms, this is a word for you as well, because I said, really it's parents, but he used the word fathers, okay? But it's really parents. So if you find yourself in a parenting role in your home, this is a message for you. Dad sets the temperature for this in his house by deliberately avoiding the things which make a child rebel. It says here, provoke them not to anger. And the word here for anger is not the common word which describes a slight irritation or temporary upset, because even in the best homes, proper discipline can make children angry. So it's not talking just about, hey, I told you you can't go out tonight, and the child gets angry. No, it's by living and doing things consistently over time that drive your children to places of rebellion because of lack of consistency. You see, kids aren't mature. They don't always react as they should. It's even necessary for children to be disciplined. So in looking at the word angry, the Greek word here for the word angry is a word, and it said, if I screw up the pronunciation of this word, Bible scholars, give me some grace. But it's a Greek word called parorgizit, and it's from which we get our English word paroxysm, and that still was another language to me. I've never heard of the word paroxysm. So I had to go to the dictionary, and it says paroxysm is defined as a sudden attack or violent explosion or expression of a particular emotion or activity. What I demonstrated with my son that evening was paroxysm. It was a sudden outburst, an emotional outburst, that if not checked, could have driven my son to rebellion. And so I didn't know it then, but I always knew this. When I respond angrily, or not the way I should, I need to ask for forgiveness. I need to apologize. And these are lessons that we're teaching our children from their little coming all the way up, right? When you screw up, when you mess up, apologize. So some other examples of paroxysm or paroxysite is failing to take into account, that our kids are kids, right? So if they're younger, kids are gonna do kid stuff, right? It's comparing them to others, right? It's disciplining one child differently or inconsistently. With one child, you do X, right? You come down hard on one child, but you treat another child differently. Or you do it inconsistently, meaning your kids are never, it's always a moving target what the punishment's gonna be, and we'll touch on that later. Lastly, it's failing to express or love to them or approval to them, right? Two sides of the coin. It says, fathers, do not provoke your children to the place where they completely lose control and break out against authority. That is the word to parents. So what causes this? Well, there are two things which normally lead to rebellion in our children, right? And it's both sides of the pendulum. The first one is what I call harshness, right? So in generations past, I was born in the early 60s. My parents were born in the 30s. Their parents were born in the early 1900s. Parents before that, born in the 1800s. The older generation tend to parent from a place of harshness, right? That's what they saw modeled in their homes, and for a lot of the older generation, that's how they parented. Well, we fast forward now to the 20th and 21st century, and what we see now is the pendulum swung the entire opposite way, and our children, we now parent from a place of what I call indulgence, right? What does that mean? It means that anything or most things that our kids ask for, we give it to them, okay? Whether it's good for them or not, it's easier to give it to them than it is to have a conversation, is to say no. Neither one of the poles are correct, right? Harshness or indulgence both lead to rebellion, right? Harshness leads to rebellion because as a child, you can't say anything about it. Indulgence leads to rebellion because the lines, the barriers are constantly being shifted. Colossians 3:21 says, fathers, do not aggravate or provoke your children because they will become discouraged. Now notice this, going back to 6:4, Ephesians 6:4. It says, Father, bring them up. Second part of 6:4, bring them up. King James Version says, in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. NLT translates discipline and instruction, or another word for instruction is exhortation, right? But it's fathers, bring your children up. It's not children, bring your fathers or bring your parents up, right? So we have to understand that as the parents, it is our responsibility. But we need to do this by avoiding harshness and indulgence, because both will produce the same results: rebellion and a lack of attention or lack of responding properly to authority. There's this guy called Sir Clement of Alexandria. He wrote, the father who teaches his son must not be harsh or angry, but gentle and mild, and must not be severe in correcting him, but must show him kindness and love. We take these cues from our Heavenly Father. Heavenly Father, he reproved, he corrected, he instructed. But the Bible tells us in John 3:16 that he loved. For God so loved the world, right? Loved you and me. So what we're doing in parenting should always begin from a place of love, not responding, or I shouldn't say responding, because typically when we're behaving from a place of anger, it's not a response. Primarily it's a reaction. A response or responding requires thought. Reactions involves emotion. So it's just a subtle difference for us as parents. How are we responding versus how are we reacting? Lack of discipline will make a child insecure, miserable, self-centered. This is what we'll call a spoiled child. In Jamaica, we used to use the term spoiled brat, one who grows up to expect to have his way in everything. This comes about as a result of our current situation where we find ourselves in places of indulgence, where parents are allowing children to make decisions. You're asking your 4, 5, 6, 7-year-old to make decisions regarding what they're going to eat, regarding what they're going to wear, regarding what time they're going to go to bed. We're asking this from 4, 5, 6, 7-year-olds. They don't have the capacity to make correct decisions. God's placed you in the household to steer, lead, and direct that. Have you ever seen a parent in the supermarket negotiating with a crying child about what they can and can't put in a shopping cart just to get the crying child to be quiet? I remember a number of years back, this is probably 2013 or 14, and my wife and I were standing in the lobby, and dear friends of ours, young parents, and the wife had their youngster on her hip, and he was whining, he was complaining. He was probably around 2 or 3 at the time. And she decided to give him a lollipop just to shut him up. And so she gave him a lollipop, and he was sucking on the lollipop. He got done with the lollipop, and we were still talking with the mom. And then he started crying and whining and complaining again. And before that, she had told the child, she goes, hey, you're getting one lollipop, and when the lollipop's done, no more lollipops. Well, he starts whining and crying because the lollipop's done and mom's not leaving. So he starts crying. And she reaches into her purse to get another lollipop to give to this little guy, little 2 or 3-year-old. My wife, and if you know my wife, a lot of times you'll see her around here and she's smiling. But she's fierce. I call her, she's my crazy Jamaican immigrant, right? And in that moment, she reached and she grabbed that mother's hand and she goes, no, you just told him that that last lollipop was the last lollipop, was the only lollipop. And here you are going back on your word. And she took that lollipop out of her hand and she put it in the lady's purse. Now, you can imagine, mom just looked at her like, okay. But here's the thing. We have to remember with our children to say what we mean and mean what we say, right? Our children are taking cues from us, right? They're looking to see, does our word match our actions? And that'll be a consistent theme today. Are we saying what we're meaning and meaning what we're saying? You know, in that moment, right, that became a shepherding moment for this younger mother, right, from an older mother. And so, you know, Paul commands us in Scripture, you know, older women teach the younger women, older men teach the younger men. That's why we do church, right? That's why we talk about community groups. That's why we have marriage mentorship relationships. That's why we have, you know, kidmin. That's why we want to be able, as a church faith family, is to come alongside each of us. Because guess what? There was a time 20 years before that, we were that young couple. And we needed an older couple speaking into the places that for us were well-intentioned, or we were just tired and we just needed to just not hear a kid cry and whine. And we needed to have people speak into that to help us to become better parents. A lack of proper discipline more than anything else will create insecurity in a child. A child without discipline feels unwanted and terribly unhappy. What I mean by that is they never know what to trust. We as parents will set limits by putting walls around our kids, right? Now, walls sometimes can be seen as prison, right? Can be seen as quite limiting. But if you step back and look at it, you'll understand that these walls that can appear limiting really gives us freedom. It lets us know what the boundaries are, both as parents, but more importantly to our children, right? Think about it at home when you go to bed at night, right? Now, I don't camp, right? But if I went camping, sleeping outside, looking at the stars with bears and lions and snakes and frogs, right? That doesn't seem pretty safe to me. But in my house with walls provides me the security. And that's the same it is with our kids. Us as parents setting these boundaries, these walls, provide the security that our children need to be able to blossom and flourish the way God intended for them to. Another example of this is watching parents negotiate with their youngsters around what time they should go down for the night. Now, we've got two lovely ladies in our current culture who are pretty good at telling us all what to do. One's Siri, and one is Alexa, right? And so a lot of times, I'll hear, okay, Alexa, set the timer for 5 minutes. Because you're getting kid ready mentally that, hey, we're shutting the day down, it's time for bed. So a child's playing, and then sure enough, in 5 minutes, the timer goes off. Okay, Johnny, it's time to go to bed, but I don't want to go to bed. It's not time yet. Okay, Alexa, set the timer for 5 more minutes. That becomes our default. Instead of saying as parents, hey, I told you, 5 minutes. So 5 minutes is up. Time to go to bed. Chop, chop. No, we acquiesce, right? And so we do this, and a lot of times we're doing this without even thinking. But I said, you're sending messages to your children, okay? Now, so as I said before, our kids need to know that what we say as parents, that they can trust our word, right? Because we want our kids to know, we want to teach them, because we are extensions, the Lord's placed parents as the authority figures in the house. We want them to have confidence and trust in the place that, hey, if mom or dad says this, I can bank on it. Why? Because it's also a picture of the Bible, right? We want our kids to know with no thought that they have to wrestle with that, hey, mom and dad says the Bible is true, right? So if the Bible is saying it, I can trust it. But if mom and dad's words aren't to be trusted, then as a child, can I trust the Bible? Right? And so these things have far-reaching implications, folks. Far-reaching implications. So as I go back to what my wife said to that young mom that day, and I'm going to want you to repeat after me, because I want you to, if one of the few nuggets you take home today is this phrase, then I've done my job. So I'm going to say, repeat after me. Say what you mean and mean what you say. So on the count of 2, 1, 2. Say what you mean what you say. As a parent, if you can start gaining some mastery just over that one thing, you're going to change the temperature and climate in your home more than you'd ever realize. Hebrews 12:6 tells us that because the Lord disciplines the one he loves and he chastens everyone he accepts as his son. King James Version says, whom the Lord loves, the Lord chastens, right? So God, in his ultimate wisdom, right, is chastening or disciplining those he loves. So as parents, don't ever run away from that responsibility, because God himself says in his word, who he loves, he chastens. Whom he loves, he disciplines. I told you earlier, John 3:16, but God so loved, right? So he doesn't just discipline, he also loves. And it's the balance of both of those things. God, the love leading to discipline, as opposed to discipline coming from a hard place of frustration and anger. That's where we as parents start to see fruit in the lives of our kids. Fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, long suffering. So one of the things I have always had to remember is my worst parenting times, and my worst times as a husband, is when this isn't right? It's when my heart's not in a good place. I respond angrily to things that I really shouldn't respond angrily to. But when this is right, it's amazing, because then I start responding appropriately. And so, the word reminds us all the time to guard our heart, right? So as mom and dads, you need to do what's necessary to guard your heart. You need to spend time in the Word. You need to get yourself around other godly folks to help us walk this thing that we call life. Ephesians 6:4, once again, but rather, second part, rather bring them up in the discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord. Another word for instructions, I said earlier, is exhortation. Okay? So part of how do we flesh this out as parents, right? So as our children get older, physical discipline should start to morph into exhortation. What I mean by that is when our kids are younger, it's a lot of, hey, do as I say, because I'm mom and dad, right? And if you don't do, then you get tap on the butt or you go in timeout, right? That's what we do with our younger kids. But as your kids start to get older, we typically don't spank them anymore, right? Because for some of us, if you're like me, and I'm 5'5", and my child's 5'11", if I try to spank, he could kick my butt, so it just doesn't make sense to do that, right? So we've got to figure out, okay, how do we as parents start transitioning to continue to parent, but parent differently? So one of the things that you start doing as a parent is you start saying, okay, you start now explaining, why am I doing what I'm doing? Not just because I said so, but, hey, Susie, I'm telling you to do this because ... right? Start explaining to the kids why it is that you're doing what you're doing. Our job is to help a child see beyond their restrictions or limitations, right? And that's the reason why we start sharing the whys. One of my employees asked me a few months back as I was sharing my thoughts on parenting, she says, hey, at what age did you start giving your children chores? And I responded, and as I responded, I felt a little, it's like, wow, we actually did that? So here's what we did. I said, we started giving our kids responsibilities when our son is around 5 and our twin girls were around 3. And their first chore was to clean their bathroom. So can you imagine that? I said, no, I told you before, my wife is this crazy Jamaican immigrant, hardcore, right? And that was the first job we gave our youngsters. But as she said to them, I don't expect you to clean it like an adult would, but what we're trying to do is instill in you that you live in the house, you made a mess. Part of your responsibility is to clean up the mess. Part of my role as a parent is to help you understand that you clean up your mess. That if you sit at the table and you eat dinner, lunch, whatever, and you get up, that you just don't leave your plate at the table, right? Somebody has to pick it up. No, you pick it up and you put it in the dishwasher, you put it in the sink. Teaching our children responsibility. If you've been to our Next Steps class, right, one of the things that we talk about, this is a side note, one of the things we talk about is shared responsibility, right? And we all get to call this place, Church of Clayton Crossings, home. But we shouldn't leave the responsibility for helping people find and follow Jesus. We shouldn't leave that responsibility just to the staff, just to the elders, just to, the folks, the community group leaders. No, all of us as partners play a role in the mission of this church to help people find and follow Jesus. And so it's the same way in our homes, right? We all live under that roof, and it's all of our responsibility to make sure the home can function accordingly. And it's our job as parents to instill that in our youngsters. So what we want to do, we want to give our children Christ-centered instruction. As you walk with them, as you drive them places, as you play with them, as you sit around the table to have meals with them, talk about Jesus. Some of the best conversations we have had with our kids is on family trips back and forth. And normally here's how it would look in our household, right? We're driving and we said to them, hey, what are some of the things that your friends are struggling with? And by now I said they're teenagers, right? What are some of the things that they're struggling with? Because we wanted to get to know our kids, okay? And they would start tell us, and they would say, what about you? What are some of the areas that you're struggling with? Because if we led the other way, well, what are things that you're struggling with? Have you ever spoken to a teenager? You get nothing, right? So we would start with, let's talk about your friends. But we wanted to be intentional in also getting to know our kids, getting to know what they're struggling with, helping them to learn about Jesus, okay? So use family trips. Don't just let family trips be a time where everybody's on their devices. Use that time that you've got this captive audience in the car to engage them in conversation. Talk to them and teach them about your values, your beliefs, your feelings, your motives. Talk to them about things like sin, repentance, grace, the cross. But more importantly than talking to your kids about those hard-hitting subjects, model it in front of your children. Modeling is is where the rubber meets the road. Because so many times, and I'm guilty of this, I'm pretty good at talking about it, but I'm not as good at living it out. And so part of our jobs, going back to the trust factor, is helping our youngsters, right? Whether they're young guys and gals or older, is helping them figure this stuff out. Here's what I mean when I talk about modeling. How can we possibly convince our children that material things aren't the most important things in life when all they see us hearing and doing and talking about is, I got to go to work so we can save money for the next family vacation, or we got to buy a car, we got to buy a bigger house, and all these material things. How can we tell them that material things are not important, yet that's what they hear us talking about? Conversely, how many times do they hear us in our conversations talking about, tithing, going on mission trips, other focused, kingdom building focus, right? Because we're saying as Christians that these are the important things. It's what we're saying. But what we're modeling looks completely different. I've seen a report that says one of the best things we can do in helping our kids be more successful in life is giving them the ability to make mistakes early on. It's what I call, it's starting the process of gradual emancipation, right? Gradually releasing of the apron strings. So you begin early to feed them responsibility, right? So that when they're older, you have now allowed them to learn under your roof, to learn where the consequences aren't as huge. The time to give your kids responsibilities or your youngsters responsibility is not at 18 when they're going away to college. Because we've seen it, right? You give your kids responsibility as they're going away to college, as that's the first time you're doing that, you're setting them up for failure. What you're gonna have happen is you're gonna have a child who makes poor decisions. Why? Because they did not have the luxury of learning and stretching and building those muscles under the confines of those walls that we talked about in your home. So if you got young ones, start giving them responsibility. You got older ones, keep giving them responsibility, but start loosening the strings. Allow them to make wrong decisions, because it's in the making of the wrong decisions that you'll be able to teach them the skills to make right and proper decisions. Here's another thing I see. Let them live with the consequences of decisions that they make, okay? And I remember my daughter, she was in college, and she said to me, she had an internship between her junior and senior year in college, and she called me, she goes, Dad, I'm making great money, and I want to buy a Beamer or an Audi. I'm going, you want to do what? She goes, yeah, I want to buy, I'm making this good money, and we bantered back and forth. And finally, I said to her, she wasn't going to convince me, I wasn't going to convince her. So I said, okay, here's the deal, KK. When you've got 15 grand in the bank, we'll revisit this conversation. Until then, do not talk to me about this. So this was in October. In early February, she called, she goes, Dad, I've got the 15 grand. I goes, wow, that was quick. But I said, I got to be a man of my word, right? I had to say what I mean and mean what I said. I said, all right, KK, we'll go look. So are we going to buy that Honda Civic I told you about? Nope, Dad. I said a Beamer or an Audi. I said, all right. I said, here's the deal. I don't think that's the proper choice. But my word that I'd given to you says we would revisit the subject when you had 15 grand in the bank. So she found a Beamer online and bought the car. And I told her, I said, here's the deal. German engineering is nice to drive till things break. Then it gets pretty expensive. So you're right now functioning what I call my permissive will. I'm allowing you to get this Beamer, but it's not my perfect will. My perfect will would be that you'd buy something else. So I said, do not call me when this car breaks. Because it's German engineering and it will. It's going to be expensive. But I had to be true to my word, but I also had to allow her the space to learn from going against what my perfect will would have been, right? And so it's the same thing with our kids. When we tell them, when we say what we mean, we also have to allow them to live out the consequences of the decisions they make. Because so many times as parents, we find ourselves wanting to hop in and rescue them when they've made poor decisions and poor choices, and gone against what we as parents have said they should make. So allow them to clean up their own messes. In doing so, we'll start helping them to formulate how to make right decisions. It's been said before that successful parenting some days equals keeping my kids out of prison, and on other days it looks like successful parent looks like keeping me, the parent, out of prison, right? Because you want to strangle them. And so parenting, James Dobson talked about parenting is not for cowards. And he said, it is tough, but the Lord's equipped you. He's equipped you from His Word. He's equipped you with people that He's placed in your lives. You do not have to walk this thing alone, okay? Ephesians 6:4 gives us two goals. It says, one goal, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger or rebellion. The second goal is to bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. Or kids today, particularly, kids who grow up in Christian homes, right? We sometimes think that bringing them to church and them learning these Bible stories is good, and guess what? It is good. But here's what we need to make sure they're learning. We've got to make sure they're not just learning Bible stories for the sake of learning Bible stories. Our job as parents is to teach our kids Christ. What I mean by that is we want them to not learn the stories, but to learn the storyline. You see, the Bible is not just a book about rules, about what we should be doing. It's quite the opposite. It's a book about God and what He has done, right? The Bible is not a book about heroes, right? It's a book, or not just solely about heroes. It's a book about fallen man and how God redeems fallen man by chasing him. So let's make sure that while we're teaching the stories, we're making sure that we're teaching the storyline, the central themes. How does this apply to you? How does this apply to me? It's a story of God passionately pursuing men and women, boys and girls, for a relationship. Psalm 127:1 tells us that unless the Lord builds a house, its builders labor over it in vain. Unless the Lord watches over a city, the watchman stays alert in vain. So this morning as we're closing, my question to you is, who is building your house? And what is your house being built on? Is it being built just solely on your strength? Because if it is, Psalm 127:1 reminds us that unless God Himself, the Lord's building a house, then we're laboring in vain. Mom and dads, stepmoms, stepdads, single moms, single dads, grandmas, grandpas, we can't do this on our own. We can only do it successfully if it's the Lord that's building our house. And just a side note, grandparents, because I find myself as a grandparent now, and I find myself having to close my lips, right? Because I'll see my kids doing things that as a parent or as a grandparent, I'm going, no, you shouldn't do it that way. But I also have to allow them the space as well, right, to parent how they feel they need to parent. And so to grandparents, as you're in that place where you may be in disagreement with your kids, commit it to prayer. Hit your knees, okay? Don't berate your kids over it. Hit your knees, right? Respect the boundaries your kids have laid out for their family. But if they're doing things in, hit your knees, talk to the Lord. Ask the Lord to change their hearts. So we labor in vain if we're building this house without God. So for some of you, you're believers, but you says, hey, I've not been doing it God's way. I've not been consistent. I've been indulgent, or I may have been harsh. And then for others, you go, Wayne, that all sounds good, but I don't even know this person you call Jesus, so where do I even begin? Where do I even start? And so this morning, I want to call you into a relationship with Him, right? And allow Him to come in to your life, start making a change in how you think, how you process, how you parent, how you lead. So up front, we call it here, church, we call it our altar, but there are no altar seats or kneeling stools or anything. But we've got folks here from our prayer team, from our leadership team that would love to pray with you. Our senior pastor Andre's over here. We may have some folks in the back. But if you want somebody just to pray with you, or if you want, us to point you to resources, we've got resources on the board outside in the lobby. We want to help you as dads and moms be successful in raising your kids. We want you, and when I say successful, I'm talking them just being well-adjusted kids. I'm talking about them becoming believers, putting their faith and trust in Jesus. So let's pray. And as I said, if there's anyone here that needs prayer, just wants to talk, then come on up. We'll have folks that will pray with you. Father, thank you again for this morning. Father, thank you for your word. It's reminding us as dads, as moms, to not provoke our children to anger that leads them to rebellion, dear Lord. Father, we know we can't do this on our own. It can only be done through the grace of Jesus and the power of the Holy Spirit. So, Father, I pray that you'd convict our souls. Pray that we'd leave here this morning looking in the mirror and say, okay, where is it that we need to change? Thank you once again for your word. In your name I pray. Amen. Let's continue in worship.